Hey everybody, it's Pooch Van Druten here along with Chris Rabold.
What's going on, folks?
There he is, the man, the myth, the legend. We are up to episode 20. And we were just talking before we started recording about how we feel like we haven't done kind of a technical one in a while. So I thought maybe this episode we talk a little bit about vocal processing, effects. I don't know. How do you, anywhere you want to go with it. But, you know, everyone is always talking about how to get the ultimate vocal sound and what are the tools that are that you use to get that. I think that what I do is way more simpler than what people think that I do.
I think that's your Emma. For people that don't know, and we've touched on it here, I think a lot of people, if they saw your session, which I guess now people are seeing your session, yeah, you don't do a lot of like crazy, stupid, insane stuff.
I don't. You know? And you know what? It's about, for me, I think the secret to my success in general is about balance. Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. Shout out to a friend of mine. His name's Ken Lewis, and he has an audio online. I think it's called audioschoolonline.com. But he is a world-renowned recording engineer. We went to Berkeley together. He has 56 Grammy nominations and like 6 wins. You know, credits on 125 gold and platinum records. He is an amazing engineer. And he, during this COVID time, has started stuff like we have. His YouTube channel is called Mixing Night. Go check it out. Every Wednesday night, he does about a 2-hour live stream. But he is very similar to me in like the things that are important are way more simple things, you know, like balance. And he does this thing at the end of his live stream where for 10 minutes he takes stems that have been randomly mixed up by his assistant volume wise. The actual sounds of them are there. So they're stems of, you know, a 200 track thing. But he down to, you know, 30 faders worth of stems. But then the assistant comes in and randomly changes the volume, and he spends 10 minutes just on balance.
Oh, that's fun.
Getting the stems lined up and how, you know, and how you make that sound good. And what he's trying to teach, he'll even say this, and what he's trying to teach is instinct about balance, right? Which I think is a hard thing to teach, right? That is something that you only through lots of experience are you going to get to a point where you have an internal kind of instinct about where balance is. So anyway, I went down this balance rabbit hole because it's way more important to me than what the latest plugin is on a particular input. And that's just so you guys have a knowledge of the way, kind of how my brain works. It's my first go-to is not to put the latest plugin on something, right? And I know you are very similar in that way. But I think your workflow is different than mine. You do a couple of more tricky things than I do, whatever that means.
And I don't really nowadays, particularly during COVID era, now that we're all watching each other share what we do.
Right.
Now I'm like, God, am I a dinosaur? Like I'm looking at some of these things that some people do. And then I take a moment to think, and I'm like, you know what? No, I think I'm in pretty good shape right where I am. I think I'll just stick with my tricks. Well, and to your point, sorry, real quick, to your point, I'm getting ready to, when we talk about vocals, I'm getting ready to mention a lot of effects that I build into my session. If anything, I am the first person to, if you told me I couldn't have any effects at all, I would be so okay. I am way more into dynamic processing, harmonic processing.
100%, yeah.
I could Man, I mean, I'm going to mention a lot of things that I build into my session. What I often use is a few of those, and a lot of times none of them at all. I just like to have them there, you know?
Yeah, I always, we do these things and we're trying to help you to understand maybe how our workflows are so it can help you to improve, or give you a different perspective on how to do things. So we speak in terms, a lot of numbers, and I put this much amount of this and whatever, but ultimately, like, the way that my brain works is very much about the music and the feel and how it should come across to the audience. Like, I am not, all these guys that are doing all these tips and tricks and putting stuff through parallel buses and da 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 are, to me, are thinking about that and not thinking about how I can make this sound better for the result, right? And I think that it takes, if your brain is locked up into this whole, I need to use this with parallel compression, and this uses this particular reverb device, then you're not doing the music the justice. So I do feel like, same as you, that sometimes we are feel a little bit like dinosaurs, like, oh shit, should I be doing that? I don't know. But the thing is that our result ends up being better because of what we're concentrated on. Does that make sense?
It does. I actually was texting with a buddy right before we got on here, and I went on yet another one of my kind of rants about, we were talking about system engineering, system tuning stuff, and I went on yet again. I've mentioned on here numerous times the whole thing where the IT component is so heavy that the critical listening thing is now like the last little bit of it, and that drives me insane. And I'm seeing the same thing in mixing, whereas there's like this arms race to have the most amount of gear, the most amount of plugins, to do the craziest amount of routing. I'm watching it take place every day.
I know.
Again, and this thing is, we're all like looking at each other, and what are they, even if you're not trying, you're learning what other people are doing. There's like this race to use the most shit. And I guess there's always been, it's just now we've never had access to as much as we do. And at first I'll see it and I'll be like, oh, that's amazing. And I'm like, no, those are just a lot of words. And that's all technical jargon. None of that. I have no idea what their end result is.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Now, that's not to say that some of the newest, latest technology is cool. And, it's not that both Chris and I do adapt new things. I know in a previous video, we were talking like about ozone, right? It's like voodoo black magic plugin that I use quite a bit, in my mixing here in the box Pro Tools rig. So it's not like we don't adapt to the newest, latest technologies of things. It's just that I find, and I know Chris believes this true too, the simplest way is often the best way.
Right.
And so, having said all that, let's kind of circle back around to the vocal thing. I'd start us off. What are you using on your vocals? What do you do with them? What's your philosophy? Blah, blah, blah. What do you got?
Right. Yeah, here goes the blah, blah, blah. Well, we did one on kind of our vocal chain.
Yeah.
So we're kind of moving into the processing, into the effects. So, like you mentioned, some of what we talk about here sometimes is not complex, but maybe a lot and very specific. And a lot of the ways, like how I'm going to build a show file, a lot of it is done so I have all of these options for myself. And it's not only to have the options because my experience tells me I might need those options. It's because I don't want to have to restructure my show file 6 months into the tour and have to change the layout and restructure and give me yet another reason to have a heart attack because I've changed everything. In other words, I'd rather just build it once.
Yes.
Even if it's not overkill, but even if it's like maybe more full featured than I need, and then I never have to worry about it again. So the way that I start, let's just go ahead and start talking nuts and bolts, so to speak.
Yep.
I will often build with respect to, and I'm like you and like everybody else, I try to lay my shit out the same way every time. In other words, that vocal fader, that like, I don't think there's anything revolutionary, is often in the first slot to the right of the center section. At least that's where I always put it. It doesn't matter where it is, but we all probably put our lead vocal in the same spot. Often what I'll do as far as what effects, I'm just going to hit them real quick. I will often build into my session 2 reverbs. My logic is a quick one, a room one, a make it louder kind of thing. My second one is more of the tail reverb. Now, one thing I should say before we get going, all of this is built for the best scenario possible. In other words, a vocalist that's on the mic, that's giving me lots of level, that's not super affected by the PA. So this is all what I build. Again, what I use might be far different. So I typically have those 2 reverbs. I will then typically have 2 to 3 delays. One is a dedicated, I just reserve the right to kind of figure out what it's going to be. It's either going to be like a tape slap, kind of thing. It might be super quick, like within 100 milliseconds, or it might be a more traditional 180, 120 millisecond kind of thing. The second is often a tempo-based, some sort of quicker, maybe either a quarter, eighth note delay, sometimes ping-pongy. And the third is always for the throws. I will then also build a pitch. It's usually verb, pitch, and then all the delays. Once in a blue moon, I'll add another one on there. And then I like for the lead vocal to have its own set of effects. Background, you know what I mean? Yeah. So then the backgrounds often have not a lot. There's rarely a delay assigned to them. It's usually just verb and maybe like a pitch shift kind of thing. Now, here's the honest to God truth. Oftentimes how I decide what I'm going to use is based on the layout, the ergonomic layout, because I want them all on the same layer. I hate when I have that one that's hanging out somewhere else. And I know that sounds picky, but I just want to be able to see them.
Of course.
So in a nutshell, that's kind of my default. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah. 2 reverb.
In your first layer, let's say, where your lead vocal is in your right hand first fader, do you then put your effects following that fader, or are they on another layer?
No, the way I do it ideally is first fader is vocal. Second fader, now it'll often look like this. If it's just a singer and there's no, let's be honest, it's 2020. If there's no like super critical track vocal, it's just a singer, it goes vocal. If there's also a duplicate lead vocal that gets used, it's live vocal, and then it's that vocal next to it.
Yep.
After that, I put the send. Often, not always, but often I put the send to the throw delay there. Then after that, I have the return to that throw delay. Then I have the shorter delays next to it. Then I have the verbs. Then I have I always have it so it goes in order of the send too. I'm kind of anal about that, but that's how it looks. So it's vocal or vocal, send, so I can hit specific words if I want to. Then the return. So all that stuff that's active is right there. Then it comes all of his or her effects, then the backgrounds, and then the background group, and then their effects. So that's usually within the consoles that I use, that's 12 faders.
Yep.
So sometimes it will creep into the other one. What does yours look like?
Mine looks just like that. The only thing that I don't do, which I think is interesting that you do, and
sorry, real quick. I put, if there's track, which there often is, if there's track background vocals, I put the Pro Tools back. I put those on that layer too.
Yes.
So all vocals are visually in front of me.
Yes. And mainly for me, I almost never touch the return of effects. I am a sending effects guy. So definitely any sort of delays or whatever are, when I'm turning them on and off, it's not, they're on all the time and I'm bringing up the return. That is never how I operate. I always operate with the return of the delay is up at all times. I'm deciding what I'm sending to it. And that is also true of reverbs and stuff in general. I may turn them down a little bit versus a big ballady kind of a song versus a main song. I'll make decisions about how much of that. But oftentimes that is also based on the send. how much is being sent there is part of the snapshot rather than the return. So the reason that I put my effects on that same layer is because I want to see that they're working, and I want to see their metering, and that when I send something to it, I can see it return back at me, and so that honestly, the main reason that they're there is so I could grab, like, if I had to grab some sort of EQ thing or metering. It's maybe not even so much that the faders are in front of me. The send thing that you do is really cool. I don't do that. I probably should. I do all of my sending from rotary knobs, kind of old school analog. Yeah. Old school analog is how my brain works. And I know that you can now make it a fader and it can sit there and you can make anything you want on a digital console. But for some reason in my brain, it makes the most sense to have rotary knob and have the send of that rotary knob. So on a Digico, for instance, you know how you can page through stuff. So on an SD7, there's 3 options of that, and often 2 out of those 3 are not pageable. They're stuck in being the delay sends or whatever, and those are changeable per layer. So sometimes I'm also the guy that as far as money channels go, like if it is the main vocal, I don't know, if there's any sort of playback or background vocal or whatever, those for me are copied on the same fader in every layer on that side. So if that first fader on my right hand side this is any console, not just Digico, if that first fader is the lead vocal, it is the lead vocal in every layer underneath it, because if I'm over working on something in another layer and there needs to be a delay send or whatever, it's always in front of me. I'm always able to grab that aux send quickly to do any sort of delay stuff.
That we were showing our sessions recently. I noticed that you did that, and it reminded me when I saw it talking about leaving the vocal on every single one, and it reminded me that I used to do that, which was kind of a holdover from the Avid, where you could bank safe that channel, which was nice. And then for some reason, I just moved away from it. And I don't know, the right side of my desk is usually vocals up top. Then I will have like an effects layer, even though I have those effects usually living with whatever they're specific to.
Yep.
And then like I can think with Bruno, there's like horns over there too. And then it's like miscellaneous recording, blah, blah. So I kind of don't ever leave the vocal area.
I understand. I don't generally either, but I always, it's kind of a security blanket. Like I feel like even if I got in a weird situation where all of a sudden I was banked into bank 6 for some reason, I would still be able to grab that effect. Now, what I do, the reason that I was traveling down that rabbit hole was sometimes I will take that same fader and assign different aux sends to different layers. So for instance, if I had 4 delays, the top layer of that fader might be the aux send of the first delay and the second delay, and then the second layer has the third delay and the reverb locked in on those rotary knobs. So I can access those quickly without having to page through rotary knob stuff as well.
Yep.
So that's another reason that I put that same vocal fader I assign to the same place everywhere. So yeah, that's kind of my thing.
I get it. I don't, especially with my lead vocal, actually rarely, no, I'll say it, never with my vocals, do I automate the sends in any way. I usually have them always at 0.
Oh, that's interesting.
I only do the returns.
See, I'm exactly the opposite.
Really?
Yep.
I guess I do it that way because in my mind, not if I like want to make, and we went into this, and I think in the sort of the one of our earlier vocal ones, but as far as what's subject to automation and what's not,
right?
Like the return of the delay throw, the return is always saved. In other words, I want it to start every song, whatever. So it's pretty common. Oftentimes, to be honest with you, by the time it's all said and done, sometimes none of my vocals returns or sends are automated. But my logic is if they are, or if there's one I move a lot, I only want to move it once. Like I don't want to have to do it in every snapshot. So I think that's why I do it that way. Yeah, I really pretty much just park my sends. But
so your send to a delay, for instance, the return is at 0 all the time, and the send to it is sitting there parked but able to be triggered by an on button, right? Is that what you do with it?
Going back, so like for the throw one, the send is always at 0. The master, the aux out, is muted.
Interesting.
The return is always is never. This is for the big one, the money one. It's never automated at all. It always is, and it sits at 0. So what I'm hitting when I say I hit that, I do it. It's the master.
The master of the aux send. Yeah, right. Got it.
It just and sometimes I can get away, and I know lots of guys who they only ride the return on the delay, and that can be the fucking shittiest sound ever when you've got all those other words.
Sound.
I hate it too, and then I've got friends that do it, and they do it really well. And I used to do it with Beyonce. It's like delays are super critical, and they all go back to her, and I would do it sometimes, and I got to where I was pretty good at it. And I kind of have some songs where I will just do the whole return, but by and large, usually if I want a really pro sound, I'm hitting words, stuff like that.
It's listen, it's an interesting conversation. I've had lots of people ask me this, and I just don't like the sound of an input going to a delay all the time, and then you bringing up the return of that sounds very different than triggering the send to it and only delaying what you want delayed from it.
If you guys are wondering, anyway, a lot of people are shaking their heads going, yeah, no shit. But the people they're saying, well, why? It's because you've got all that trash going to it. So even if you can nail if you have any repeats at all, you might nail the one word. You might be in time, but then after that word is the whole phrase repeating to get your repeats. If anybody's kind of wondering what we're talking about. And that's just a cluttery, clunky, that's just not a good sound.
And not only that is when you bring up the return of the particular word that you want, let's say, it still has the tail end of stuff from before it that's cluttering all the bottom of that. So,
and then you're also left with having to make sure that you're holding it for the number of repeats. It's just easier to hit the word, come out, it's,
and also it allows you to I automate my feedback a lot in delays. So if you were operating the other way where you were operating just turning up the returns, you would have to kind of have the same amount of feedback all the time, and then you are deciding how many of those repeats. Whereas in a snapshot, I can recall it goes to the right amount of feedback where it decays the right amount of times. And all I have to do is just send the right couple of phrases or whatever at it, and it works well.
When I first started using that technique when I was younger, sometimes I would get thrown off because I would open the delay for the word, and then I would sit there and I would be listening for the repeats, and then you've got to train yourself to not trust it to do its job. You just open it and get it out of the way. It's just safe.
It's a skill, and it's also anticipation too.
In different consoles, they're mute speed, so to speak. You got to know when it clips the word and when it doesn't, and when to get out.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's definitely a skill that you should experiment with and try to get good at, because especially in this day and age, we run into clients where, same thing like you were talking about Beyonce, Linkin Park was the same way. They wanted all the returns of all the delays, because he would actually play off of it. Chester would, he would, sing a long section that would play off of the delay. So all of that was going back to ears So every artist on stage is hearing your work. So you got,
I'm like, man, if I want to do that, it'd be a monitor.
yeah, exactly.
There's the wonderful anonymity of being out front, and we've talked about the positive feedback they get from their friends in management. I'm like, why don't I just be the thing of lore? So I'd rather be that. But what a great feeling when a artist either through the ears or the wedges, or even better feeling like through the house when they hear what you're doing, when
And
they're
play with it. Yeah.
and that is so much fun.
Yeah, that is.
That is so much. What about specifics? Let's give them. I know people dig this stuff, and I like it too, man. I look at some of my favorite engineers. I like to look at what they're using. Let's give them some of the. What are you using? What are your plugins or outboard units, or what are you using?
So reverbs are Bricasti for me right now. Although I am actually a big fan of some old school reverbs. I really like the Lexicon 480. I think that even in this day and age, the sound of it is really a great sounding reverb. Some of the TC stuff, like the 6000 series, is there's some great reverbs in that as well. But in general, also even like for drums, I like a PCM 70 still. I mean, it's a great sounding unit. But in general, these days, I'm using Bricastis when I can. I own 3 of them. And generally, for every artist that I work with, one of those Bricastis is their main vocal reverb. And then the other 2 often end up on drums. But sometimes one of them will be drums and the other one will be another kind of vocally thing. So that's Bricasti. If you don't know anything about Bricastis, they're kind of like the Porsche of reverbs. The unit themselves, its whole purpose in life is to make reverb, and there is a huge amount of processing going on in the thing. I think we've talked about reverbs before, but basically there's all kinds of ways to make reverbs. But one of the things that makes a reverb sound cheap is the tail part of the reverb and its breakup pattern. So when you hear a reverb that doesn't sound great, it's generally, if you can't speak to what it is, it's generally the problem is that the tail part of the reverb, as you get down into the noise floor, starts to break up. And there's all kinds of ways to fix that. But really the way to do it is by doing a huge amount of DSP, where it has to sit there and make calculations on the tail end of a signal all the way down into the noise floor. It's a big DSP hog. It's the reason that reverbs require so much DSP, especially when we're talking about plugins. But Bricasti for me kind of does that the best. Those are my reverbs. We'll talk about other things. What are your verbs?
Mine, for the hardware units, I've used them all, and I'm like you. I won't go too far back into history, but it's only recently, I think we mentioned it not too long ago, that it's only been in recent times that I've felt like in the box reverbs have gotten, to where I want them to be. So for a long time, even though I was using a lot of plugins, particularly on delays and some other things, I would still have the TC 6000 for sure has stuck around for a while. The Bricastis, when they were released, I don't use them as much as I used to. I say that they're still in my rigs, but if I do use them, like for the short one, I'm really into that Studio A preset. I just really like it as like a louderizer.
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
great.
Too.
Yeah.
And for the longer one, like I think, what is it? Vocal Plate A, I like. Sunset Chamber. I'm sure we could go on and on about which ones we like, but those are some neat ones that I like. Sometimes for me though, with the Bricasti, it's so organic and real and like super real sounding. Sometimes I like a more spitty, obvious, bright Verb.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like a cheaper, grainier sound. And that's when I'll go dig. And if I'm not going to use an older unit, I'll go to H Verb and I'll go to their there's like a section that's like hardware, and I'll go find, something. I'll find like the 480 thin plate or the large hall or some of those, or I like, and I never use it anymore, but I like Revive. If you're on the Avid platform, is like bright and obvious and sometimes kind of cheap sounding. But if you want to, and if you have an artist who wants to hear that Verb, sometimes the more organic ones you can't hear. They do what they're supposed to. They make this thing, but so if I need that guy or girl to hear it every night, I'll do that. So, and I'll tell you what, when the UA world, I'll use the 140, I'll use the 250. The 480 is unfortunately not available for live rack, but if you're using Apollos or something like that, you can. Here lately, and I started messing with this during quarantine. I went in and started playing with, they have this one, it's an older reverb offering of theirs. It's super cheesy called Dream Verb.
Okay.
It looks cheesy, it sounds cheesy, and I love it for that very reason. It's very obvious. So I'll use that. I'm going to forget some of the other things that I use, but that's kind of where I go on reverbs. I struggle with vocal reverb. I'm not going to lie. I hate the low end build up, but then I got to be, there's such a fine line between high. Like I have some people like, oh yeah, my reverb sends are high past the 400, 500, and they get really good results. Sometimes I feel like vocal reverb in a PA is about as hard as it gets.
I think so too. It's funny. Recently, I did an event where Scoville was there, and he's a big proponent of what you just talked about, high passing up and making the send not be the sound of what it's coming from, if that makes sense. So he does a lot of like EQing of the send part of stuff to effects. And I get it. I just have had lots of success of choosing the right reverb
and then tailoring
it and not making it about the send to it. Like I feel like I feel, and this is just me, guys. I mean, Scoville, listen, he gets great results. There's no question. I just feel, and listen, that where he got that from is that's old school Beatles technology. That's literally like from Beatles records. That's what, George was doing, making those records was back then at Abbey Road. That was their secret sauce for their reverbs, was EQing the send to the reverb. That was their thing. That's literally where it comes from. But for me, I seem to get better results when it's full bandwidth, however I have the vocals sounding, I want that to impact the front part of the reverb that way, if that makes sense. And I seem to get better results that way for me. But I do, and then so that what that requires though for me is not just choosing a hall reverb. Like it requires very specific choice of the reverb itself, and also the amount of pre-delay and like what you were just talking about, the buildup of the low end and all that stuff. I'm working on the reverb side of that rather than the send side, but I totally get the other way too. But you mentioned the H verb. I just want to say real quick, I forgot the H verb in my list. That's my go-to plugin verb. And I generally, you'll probably see 4 instances of that in my super rack.
Yeah. That's about how many I have too, particularly because it's a DSP hog. Yeah. But, I actually do, well, then what Robert does, I do most of my EQ on the send. But that's been if we go back to analog desk, there was no EQ on the send.
Right.
That we put in the live, you know what I'm saying? Like, so.
No, I know. And that's probably why I don't do it, to be honest.
And to be honest, a lot of, quick, fast, and in a hurry, I'm going to EQ the return because we both just said we keep it right in front of us. To EQ from the send is, and not that this is some huge task, but I have to go to that page.
Yeah.
Like I never look at my aux page.
Yeah.
Unless I have to go there. I'll go. So it's just another step. But I'll do stuff with all the bells and whistles we have on consoles these days. I'll often do EQ from the send. And then I'll do, like, if I have, I've mentioned it before with Bruno, it's very, wild mic technique, it's a very hot mic, I will also DS from the send sometimes. Like I'm with you. I'll choose I spend a lot of time with like and it's labeled something different everywhere, but where the high end cutoff, not just the dampening, but all of those things I'll spend. But sometimes I just need it to get the zing out of there.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. Same thing with on delay sends. I'll do that. But there's usually, honestly, now there's like delay on the send, and then sometimes there's further delay on the return. Sometimes I don't have to do either of them.
Yeah, totally.
It just comes out perfect,
I mean, I find outside, okay, there's two different kinds of exploration into effects, right? There are the effects specials. Those are, I listen to the song and there's an obvious effect there that has to happen in order for people to identify this as a Linkin Park song, for example, or as an Iron Maiden song. There is a signature delay that everyone knows, or a signature reverb that everyone knows. Those are what I deem as effects specials. The other kind of effects, including reverbs, are I'm creating space in order to make the vocal pop in my mix. And those effects for me tend to be the same from artist to artist. Like literally, I have a preset in Verb that says Pooch vocals, and that's like where I start almost on every artist. And that's because it's a preset that I've built that just seems to work very well for me for almost every artist. Now, it doesn't mean that I always leave it like that. I'll do some adjusting maybe and make the tail be shorter or longer. But I kind of have a lot of go-to things. Do you have that as well, or do you just kind of go from scratch?
100%. And as usual, how many times on this show have I talked about the notes section of my phone? I mean, I've got like Vercasti presets and TC presets. I've got all these plugins. Probably realized I could carry those on a key, but I kind of don't need them anymore. But I have go-tos for sure, just because there's certain sounds that I like,
Yeah. So do you have a type of reverb for vocals that is your favorite?
Yeah, it's either for the let's just talk about the tail one. You know what I mean? It's usually a brighter plate, or it's a plate that I'll just dig around till I find the right one. I love plates, but I don't like it when I like kind of like obvious effects. Like I don't want the super organic dark one on the stuff that I usually do. Now, when I did Norah Jones for a little while, voice is breaking up, going through puberty here right in front of you. When I did Norah Jones, it was great. Then like the super organic nature of the older sounding plates on the Vercasti was perfect. Until she heard it one day and was like, I want it dry. So here I had like one of the best vocals ever worked with. She wanted that immediate, which good on her, man. She can do whatever she wants. So I have most of the time it's the same. It's the same presets for everything. Forget vocals, for everything.
No, yeah. I mean, I carry around a key full of presets for plugin stuff for sure. And along with you, I just know, like I have favorites like you on any unit, when I walk up to, like if I walked up to a Lexicon 480 today, my go-to would be their halls, and then adjust the pre-delay in like a medium hall. And that is pretty much my starting point, for a Lexicon 480.
You talked about halls on another one that's your go-to with reverb. Halls it's usually only on vocals that I will go to. I love the sound of a good hall, and it varies so wildly from manufacturer to manufacturer, but a lot of times halls like concert hall, vocal hall, some whatever hall on vocal, that's a cool sound, particularly with a longer pre-delay. Let it clear up and let it. That's
what's funny is that most people, when you think of a hall, they think of something that's 2 second or 3 second or 4 second version of a hall, and that is not at all what I use halls for. Halls are my favorite, but I shorten them up big time. Like I will do long pre-delay, like 80 milliseconds, and do a 1.2 second tail on a preset of a hall that was previously huge, like a 5-second hall. I take the release time of that and scrunch it up to be 1.2. And to me, it's a different sound. And I think part of what I'm doing is getting rid of that breakup that happens in the tail part of stuff. I don't particularly like if I only use super long reverbs if I'm forced to. Like if they are the sound of that song or that ballad, then I'm like, okay, I'll use something, you know. And so generally, like, I don't even almost never get past 3 seconds in a reverb, you know?
No, yeah, me too. And in fact, and I'm really bad about, we've talked a lot about how like what EQs look like now that we have the graphic display. If that reverb is in the threes, like 3.3, once it gets above, like I'm like, oh, I don't think I should do, even though 3.3 doesn't sound the same on all of them. But
no, it doesn't. But yeah,
like
I know what you're saying.
I shouldn't be that far. But I'm with you. Like I never have a 7-second, anything like that. But
who's that Latin artist that likes the 10 or 12-second reverb going on? Is that?
I don't know, but I'm gonna guess. Is it
It's
I know you're talking. Is it the guy that's had like 1 million monitor engineers?
Yes.
God, who is that? I can't remember his name.
There's people out there screaming at us right now.
There's the 47 guys that have been his monitor engineer that are now screaming his name right now. They paid $1,000 a week by doing it for their 2 weeks too. I know who you're talking about, but I don't know. Now that being said,
it's not Luis Miguel, is it? Is it Luis Miguel?
I think so, actually. Okay. I think that might be who it is. Who knows?
Anyway, that makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, so in case you don't know, there's a Latin artist out there that, and famously loves 12 seconds, 14 seconds, 16 seconds of hover time reverb. So much so that they were doing crazy shit a bunch of years ago. You know, this was like 10 years ago, where they were having a reverb send that had speakers pointed back at the stage that was coming from front of house. Just crazy stuff. So I don't understand how to do any of that. I get to like 3 seconds and just go, this is way too long. I need to make it shorter.
Yep. A lot of my reverb times too, we'll move on out of reverbs here, but a lot of times my reverb stuff, they're super important at the beginning. They're super important. I know you're like, nope, it's part of it. It stays. And I want to adhere to that, but sometimes my reverbs will drift lower and lower and lower as the tour goes on. If I just really can't, like, sometimes I hear lately too, I would just rather use delays, because delays are obvious. You can hear them, but they don't clutter as much.
Yeah.
But sometimes my reverbs are way more critical, where if there's, I don't know, if I'm just under the microscope more early on, or if it's a broadcast thing, or if it's a board tape thing. And then sometimes they kind of creep down as time goes on.
I totally get that. I get that.
Yeah. And all of this too is like, there's a big, it depends component. You know what I mean? And it really does. It just depends on who's listening, to what extent, and what's the environment. And I mean, sometimes, man, I'll mute both reverb returns. Like I totally reserve the right to do that if it's a super, I don't know, dangerous scenario where I need every bit of clarity I can. So my reverb stuff, whatever. But I got, like Bruno, he rides me all the time with Instagram videos or something. It's like, yo, where's the sauce? You know, where's the sauce? And a lot of times I can get, like, sauce is more obviously acquired from a delay.
Right.
So
I totally know what you're saying. I mean, that's a perfect example of an artist, you know, he may be meaning something else than what you're interpreting as.
Right.
You know, I'll say this just about reverbs, and then we'll move on to some other things. But reverbs for me are more about creating stereo space for the vocal. I'm like you. You know, we're already in an acoustic space, especially if you're on an arena tour. There's already stuff blanking off the walls with all kinds of reflections, already making its own acoustic reverb. So having a vocal be buried in reverb only gets rid of its intelligibility. So for me, also, reverb is used sparingly, usually shorter, and is used kind of, for me, almost like I would use a spreader. I'm using it to make it be bigger in the mix, if that makes sense. Not as a reverb, let's say, or I don't think of it like, hey, I need to put this person in an artificial space. That's not what I'm thinking when I put a reverb on something. What I'm thinking is, man, this vocal sounds really great dry, but it needs something to get it to smear a little bit in the 10 and 2. And that's what I'm using in that lower part of that reverb. So hope that helps.
Yeah. You mentioned not too long ago having your lawyer friend serve as your, your sort of metric for how am I doing?
Yes.
It's way more important for people to say, for the lay person to say, I could hear every word, than for the 20 engineers in the room to go, yeah, I really heard that reverb tail. Like, who gives a shit?
Intelligibility is king, man. Intelligibility is king, especially when it comes to vocal. Cool. All right. So we got into reverbs. What else are you smearing there on a vocal usually besides delays and reverbs?
Here's a good one. Before we get to delay, maybe let's hit in terms of like creating excitement and spread. Maybe let's get into modulation or pitch shift or this or that, because I always have pitch shift built into my session. Sometimes a couple, and it used to always be an H3000, and it's weird. I either love pitch shift or I cannot stand it, and the robot falsity of it, even at the lowest level, just drives me insane. And I can hear it from a million miles away, but I always build it in there because on the right vocalist, it can create that super wow sound. And while it can get weird in the mid-range, like I'm often cutting 400 on the, here's another one, on the return though, on the return of the pitch shift, I'm often trying to get that robot-y sound out of there. So it was always an H3000 in the past. Then I started using, I still on occasion will use the Eclipse, which I know doesn't do what the I fully admit it doesn't, but it's still got this eventide thing. And then within plugin world, I try to get on with the Waves doubler and whatever the quadrupler is. I don't even know what it's called. I try to get on with those, but I don't love them. And I will use any number of different pitch shift things, or I don't often use chorus. UA has the Dimension D, the Roland, the old school unit that can do amazing things on guitars and vocals, but I'll always have something like that in there. But I'm careful. Also, an overused H3000 or overused pitch shift to me is very synonymous with like a 90s metal show that's
Limp Bizkit. It's got Limp Bizkit written all over it. Fred Durst. That was his sound, man, was the overuse of that H3000. Yeah.
I've heard a number of artists that were that way. That was they wanted just as much as that as they wanted the dry. And I find, even though like I hate too much reverb, there's more play in where a reverb sits than a pitch shift algorithm. Like, to me, that is the finest of fine lines. So I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I'll kind of leave it at that. I highly value them, but it's the first, I don't know, it can oftentimes be the first thing that gets turned off too. Where are you with your, I know we've talked about like the doubler, and this is one hold on, before we go, you'll more times than not, you look at engineers and any of their press stuff, you will see a lot of people that they don't have a single piece of hardware anywhere, except they'll still have an H3000.
Yes.
So that's a common. Where are you these days with pitch shift stuff?
I am pitch shifting for me is not a normal thing. Mm-hmm. It depends on the vocalist. For instance, I haven't used it for a while. I was using it actually on Chester because I felt like it made his vocal it spread it out a little bit and made it be nice. But it's not a normal go-to. It's not like, oh yeah, that is my vocal sound per se. When I go there, I think it is the kind of the number one thing that's lacking in Waves plugins these days. I don't like the doubler. There isn't one that does it well, in my opinion. I mean, there are some newer ones, like the Abbey Road.
I use that ADT. I use that on Florence Welch a lot, and I'll use it on horns every now and again too. That's a good one, but it's kind of obvious. It's a different sound. Yeah. On purpose.
Yeah, on purpose. And I think that's what I mean when I'm talking about chorus or pitch shifting in general. It's it's such an obvious thing that it has to have a place for it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not my normal go-to stuff.
I struggle too with not struggle, but I highly value the differences also with pitch shift, aside from like the amount. I tell you what, to me, what's more important than the amount of pitch shift, whether it's plus minus 6 plus 2, whatever, is the delay.
Right.
Is delay times. Like I will mess with those a lot. And sometimes I'll do something where it's not even a pitch shift. It's just a like 12 millisecond and a 24 millisecond. It's just, or I'll go to like 30 and 60, or it just creates that spread. Actually, nowadays, to be honest with you, I like that sound more than I do a pitch shift.
Yeah.
So just to create space and to make it, I say this all the time on here, to make it sound like you've done something.
Yeah.
Just creates like a produced sound. So
I think that it's a sound in records of today as well. So, you know, some of this is we're trying to recreate what the artist sounds like on the record. So we're using that tool to get there. But I do think in general, a tool of when I use these kind of tools, a pitch shift or a chorus or something, I'm using them because I keep the center of the vocal is super dry, and all I'm doing is spreading the vocal out in the mix and trying to get depth, if that makes sense, depth and width of something that is generally straight up center and is the only thing that occupies that. So when I think about pitch shift and chorusing and that kind of stuff, I want the center part of that. It's almost like mid-side. Like I want the center part of that to be dry, you know, and the outside part of that to be affected. And that's really how I think about pitch shifting and chorusing if I use it.
Yep. If you remember on another one of these, I mentioned having a width bus.
Yeah.
Width bus can also be used to do that, what you're saying.
That's
you know,
cool.
Or you just drop that on the reverb itself and scoot it out to the sides.
Remind everybody, like, what's on that width bus? Like, what is the effect that's on that bus?
Width bus is it'll be some sort of, it's often done through some sort of, it's a stereo widener, but I prefer to use oftentimes ones that are simply mid-side based, where effectively all you're doing is turning up the sides.
Yeah.
Because it's damaging phase-wise. You can find some of the other stuff.
Do you have a favorite one is what I'm asking? Like,
oh yeah, for me, it's the Brainworks. It actually comes, their widener is the same widener in all their plugins, but I often use it from the, whatever they're on now, God, for years I screwed this up. It's like the VEQ3 or whatever it is. It's that's any of the Brainworks wideners kind of operate on the same principle. But I used to use, I messed with all the different waves ones, from whether it was S1 to the X split 22 and all that shit. I used to use this I still own it. It's this Studio Technologies AN2 box. It's mono in, stereo out. And those work on the premise of here's your signal as a whole. It makes comb filters and then spreads them. So you've got different frequencies on each side and it sums to mono, because I'm really conscious of how it sums. But that's what I do. I usually use some sort of Brainworks thing to do it.
We do that as well, and that's where we kind of differed on a previous video, was that I do, and I think you do this too, but I don't have a separate kind of bus for that, although I think it's a really great idea and I'm going to steal it from you.
Oh, yes, definitely use it, but usually it's on a return and input, something like that.
Got it. That's cool. What else? Where should we travel down next in this path?
Let's go to delays.
Okay.
What those delays are. Yeah.
What's your favorite? So traditionally for me, when I first started, using stuff, it was the TC2290. That was the thing, man. That was the first unit that had tap delay on the front panel of it. And it was the first unit. If you had the long chip, it was the first one that could do long delays well. So I had that for years. Don't use that anymore. My go-to these days is H delay. There's a bunch of options in H delay as far as modulation goes of the repeats. And also a few, high pass, low pass filtering options that are within the plugin. I can usually get the result that I need from that unit. How about you?
Yeah. Early on, I loved the TC, of course, 2290. I even like the little D2.
Yeah.
Even it would totally fall apart.
Yeah.
You know, that thing, it would totally fall apart. And then before that, a lot of the Roland stuff,
Yep.
all the Roland SDEs, the core. There were so many good delays back in the day. It's funny. I like the super tap delay better. And there's a reason I like it better. I like the way it handles its repeats. I feel like if I have like a quarter note delay and I want 4 repeats, I can hear a very even, distinct descent of those. And even though the H delay is kind of a better sounding delay, I struggle with their feedback. I struggle with it's just what I do. And I also like the fact, I know you can do ping pong on H delay, but I like how you can stagger, you can put on the super tap, whichever super tap, how you can put it on the grid and move it, and how you can tailor the low pass on that.
I totally get it. I love that unit as well. I hate the GUI of it. Like the GUI is just like, and it turns me off to using it. I get pissed at it and I just go, I don't want to use this fucking thing.
It looks like it should sound like shit. Like it looks like,
which it doesn't. It sounds great and it does some really amazing shit. I just, for whatever reason, when I dug into it, the GUI just was like, I don't understand what's going on here. Why is this knob here? And
it throws me off too. Now I'll say this with all of the delays, whether it's like super short slapback, super long special throws, whatever it might be. I look these days, I go to plugins and have for a long time now for plugins to do those for me. But I will also write in my show file, like again, let's say on any desk, but on a Digico, I will also write in the effects racks the same, because as you know, when you've got 50 snapshots with these super specific delay times, if the plugin server takes a shit, I still want to have all those. I know it's easy just to tap them, so I'll write them into my automation, even if they're not active. And if I need to in a pinch, I can switch out and bring those back.
I do exactly the same thing. I use the Digico delays. They're just sitting there. Most of the time I don't use them, but they are there and they are set to the correct millisecond choice.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to share a little something that maybe, this is old school figuring out quarter note delay stuff. It might help you guys. It's something that we used to do back in the day to figure out times for delays. And the easy way to get a quarter note delay is to use a stopwatch or use your phone that has, a stopwatch in it. And you start the stopwatch and you count to 11 in the beats of quarter note. All right. So starting the stopwatch, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on to 11, stopping the stopwatch on 11, and that will give you milliseconds of quarter note delay.
Interesting. What is the math on that?
I don't know what the math is, but I learned that from Bruce Swedien, and I've never forgotten it. And then from there, you can do the math, right? Once you know quarter note, you can say, okay, I want eighth note, or I want, 3/4 note by calculating whatever it shows up as quarter note. Let's say it's 400. The eighth note of that is 200, and the 3/4 note of that is 300, right? It's 200 minus and a half. This gives you the 100 plus the 100 gives you 300. Right. So you can do all the math to figure out exact times, but that's a very quick way to get your milliseconds of quarter note delay is counting to 11, counting in quarter notes. So you start the stopwatch on 1, you stop it on 11, and that will give you exact milliseconds. I promise you it works.
Yeah, right. One of the first things I'll do with a new gig or a new batch of songs or whatever is if there's a playback guy or if someone's triggering, or if the drummer if it's on a click at all, as I go, and this is more of a, hey guys, do this if you're newer or whatever, just go right to whoever that is. Just get all the BPMs for all the songs. Just get that. That should be one of the,
these days, that's what you can do. You just go to the playback guy and go, yeah, what are they? Come on.
Get them and have that. I'll put that in my notes section. I'll have it in my phone. I'll have it on a piece of paper. I'll make sure that I have all of that written down. something that's really interesting. You hear now, if you listen to a lot, it's so funny. Reverb is such a like security blanket, a way to hide, a way to not be exposed for vocalists. And a lot of vocalists, even whatever named today's, diva du jour, will probably want a lot of reverb in her ears. But if you listen to records, if you listen to modern records, you don't hear a lot of it's there, but it's often bright and low.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Unless
it catches the sibilance of their stuff and you hear it in S's and T's, but you don't hear it as a general kind of pad.
No. What you will hear though are lots and lots and lots of delays.
Yes.
But they're often, they're low level. And it's funny, like and I do this now where I'll have like, a lot of times my delays are delay 1, 2, 3, or I'll label them like slap, some quarter specials. But a lot of times it's like eighth notes, quarter notes. And, an eighth note to a quarter note is essentially just an eighth note with a repeat. But for whatever reason, blending an eighth note delay with a quarter note delay is a different sound.
It is.
And you hear a lot of that on modern productions, or you'll hear a lot of times they've got like delays sent to delay. There's a lot of crazy shit. And that is a good way to get an affected sounding vocal without it getting too swimmy.
Totally. And also along with that, what you were just talking about is having similar delays, an eighth note delay and a quarter note delay that are EQ'd differently. So they have, one of them is kind of telephone E and the other one is maybe more full band. That is a way to create depth and hugeness in a vocal. And that's what they're doing a lot in records these days. If you listen to them, it's not just a delay. It's a delay that's been EQ'd weird, super high pass, super low pass, that kind of shit.
I'm glad you said that telephone thing too, because I wanted to make sure I said on here, one area where I will kind of make a discretionary call is if it's a delay, if it's like you say, a signature sound kind of thing. Like I remember when I saw you the last time, you went in there and you were working with Marin and you had the first song and you were like trying to duplicate the effects on the vocal and you nailed it. And I think it did have it was like a delay with it was
a delayed reverb. Basically it was like, so it was a delay and then a send from the delay. So the repeat was the first reverb, not the main vocal having the reverb, if that makes sense.
Got it. But it was a sound. It was
signature sound of that song. Absolutely. The producer built that as this is what the vocal should sound like.
Yep. Sometimes, depending on who the act is, if it absolutely has to be like, if it's super distorted, and that has to be it, I'll do that. But sometimes it might be just, and this is not to be lazy, but it might suffice for just the delay to be heard.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And if it's someone where no one's looking at me to add that extra bit of flavor on it, I just won't put it on there. I'll make sure that just the delay is heard, because truly what everyone knows is the delay.
Totally good.
And there's reasons with that too. Like if I put it in a plug-in slot somewhere, it means I've got a delay. Like the way I would often do it would be to have a delay followed by whatever's making that whatever. Well, I've got to like turn that on for that one, then make sure it's off on all the others. So it's just like a housekeeping thing that I won't do. So that's one of those where I have to really listen and go, how truly important is that element of the effect? And again, it goes back to who's listening and does it, so that's something I thought I needed to throw out there. I'm glad you said the thing about, I will always, or usually, but pretty much always, throw my delays back into the Verb, just as a housekeeping measure.
Well, and that is about intelligibility, right? The more that you can get effects away from your direct sound, in my opinion, the better the intelligibility of the main direct vocal comes through, and still allowing for the tail end of effects to be there. So
I'll think here's a funny one, because we're kind of getting near the end of delays. I'll do things like, if I do have that return fader, and I do on occasion kind of reserve the right to throw if I'm going to play off of him or her.
Yep.
I noticed that, for instance, what seems to be a comfortable throw for me at the top of my hand is not 0. It's often -5. So I'll gain channel
it so that it goes to the right spot.
is
Yes.
0. Just stupid little stuff like that. It's just knowing where you are. And I'll often put little tape marks on I still have tape all over my console that it's like, no, that's the mark I hit if I'm going to throw. You know,
That's awesome. I love it.
And outside of these things, outside of delays, like every now and again, I mentioned using that like Dimension D, which is like a chorus thing. I sometimes will often have like a J37 plug-in or something and it's just a thing on the side. And I realize it's getting phasey and getting weird with, but I don't give a shit. It just makes it wider and does a thing. Like sometimes I'll have that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
When it comes to these effects. Is there anything else outside of conventional thinking that you do effects wise?
No, I mean, I am in general, when we speak about effects, I am probably a lot less usage than maybe some other guys are. I try to sneak. I'm like you, man. When I'm in rehearsals and everybody's doing critical listening, I'm making effects big and bold, just like the record. And then I find myself like 3 weeks into the tour, like sneaking them back a little bit just because it gives you better intelligibility and better overall. It's the argument that artists have by listening to a board mix and saying, hey, how come my vocal doesn't have enough sauce on it? Is because they're not in front of, or they aren't in the room that you are out front of the speakers and getting bombarded with the reflections that are happening off of the hockey dasher. Where an effect doesn't make sense anymore. All it is just muddling it more than making it sound like the record, if you know what I mean. So you listen to my board mixes and you will discover that a lot of stuff is probably drier than you think it is. And I think effects are important and they create space and certainly you want to be able to spread your vocal out within your mix and all those kind of things. Those effects generally stay there, but anything that I feel like is going to cloud a vocal, I'm pretty hard at turning it down. If that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now here's something we shouldn't get out of here without mentioning is tuning vocals. I can tell you I never have, just like on my own. I have taken receipt of a tuned vocal, and it's often like a purposeful, super tuned vocal for an effect that a lot of times is coming back from like the playback guy. I have taken that. I have also taken, only on one occasion, I don't mean like one day, but just for a period of time, I had an artist where they were like, without telling the artist, they were going to tune him, send it back to me, and I'm like, okay. On a taping of live TV in New York next to NBC, he literally pops an ear out and goes, "What is that?" And I'm like, oh shit, it's going down now. And that was the end of auto-tune for that. So I don't usually tune a vocal for a couple of reasons. One, it's scary because should it go awry, it's super dangerous. I know you're just chomping at the bit to speak on this one because this is a big one. No. Also, if the person's in front of the PA, it might catch on to any number of sounds and shift to that. God forbid you're in a really bad, situation and it does go a little awry, but you just quite honestly are fighting just to get through the show. And then that board mix goes back and how the fuck didn't you hear that? There's a lot of things that can go weird with it. Also with referencing Bruno yet again, just because he's my most consistent, prominent client now. And this was explained to me, you can't run like static auto tune on some people like him because he's actually between notes, but consistently between notes, and that's the charm. Now, it's not like I can go in with Melodyne and fix it with respect to itself. So I don't often use it. I'm very inclined, and I've seen people get bitten by it. I am more inclined as of late to use it because I'll tell you this, there's a lot of times there's super obvious auto tune. Then there's like people do know how to do tune tastefully now, and I'll listen to old records or old mixes or this and that, and I'm like, what is it I don't like about the vocal? And I hate to say this, it's that it's not tuned. And so even if you have an artist that's murdering it, you've got the perfect effects, you've got the perfect mic and everything, and they're pitch correct, it still doesn't have that. And that's where a lot of times artists also can't tell you what they're not digging about the vocal. And it's that it doesn't have that. So that's all my kind of saying. I want to do it more, but there's so many pitfalls involved with it. What about you?
It certainly is dangerous, and it has happened to me a couple of times, where I've been busted. Okay, so let me just tell you that the technology for it has come leaps and bounds in
Very
the
true.
last 8 years. Auto tune 1 and 2 and 3 were good, but really kind of like not designed to be used live at all. I mean, they were designed to, maybe record it to a separate track and then, decide what notes to tune and what notes not to, and used in an editing kind of a way. But nobody was really making something that tracked well live. Then Auto-Tune came out with Auto-Tune Live, and I used that for a bunch of artists. It is a sound. It is just like what you just described, where sometimes the artist will listen to it and be like, I don't know, there's something missing, and what they're missing is what they used to make the record, which was auto-tune. Okay. Yep. Nowadays, come forward now to 2020. Like Waves Tune and the latest version of Auto-Tune have settings in them that are super subtle. They can be the T-Pain version, or in my case, Travis Scott. They can be that if you want that. But they also have these settings in them that are so super subtle that all they're really doing is maybe just grabbing something right at the end of a note and kind of just giving them a lift of a vocal, that's maybe a vocalist gets tired and he sings a little bit flat. It does help. And it's a sound of today that you can't get by using a delay or a reverb or whatever. There's a tone to it that is just, it's that. Now, having said all that, do I use it often? No. There's too many pitfalls to it. And by the way, when I am using it or forced to use it, in almost all cases, I try to force it onto the playback guy or somebody else sorry, playback guys, but somebody else that can watch it and make sure that it's functioning and be focused on only it. I have way too much stuff going on at front of house to be the guy that is like focused on the auto-tune. I've done it that way. I've worked with many artists where I have auto-tune at front of house and I'm doing it, using it that way. But in general, I would prefer that there's somebody else watching it, making sure that it's working properly, and can disengage it when it's not working properly.
Or when the audible gets thrown,
yes,
and you're not on time code, or they don't catch yet. That's the big one, or between songs, or
totally.
But it becomes your job,
yes.
to watch. But it is the sound of today, and that's
why. And I think more and more people are doing what I just said, making, the playback guy, that's his job as well, as making sure that the auto-tune works. But I've done it, I've done it in front of house. It can be done. If I'm not able to get a vocal sounding the way that I want it to with using delay effects and whatever, that's often what I think about. That's like my next go-to. If someone is still like, yeah, the vocal's cool, but it's not really there, my next go-to in my bag of tricks is, okay, maybe we should start tuning this vocal, because I bet that's what they're wanting.
Yep.
So yeah, auto-tune. I used it early on with a couple of artists that it was dangerous, and the latency of it was really long. And, there were a couple of times where it kind of went awry and I had to like pop it out of the insert and, but in general, it helped. And it was two artists. One of them was a guy that just ran everywhere on the stage, and so would literally get tired and would start to sing flat. And it wasn't that he wasn't an amazing singer. He was. it was that he just, during his live performance, would just run out of air and start singing flat, and the auto-tune would kind of just give him a little nudge to help. So yeah, that's my auto-tune. We're getting towards the end here. Is there any last little thing you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think of what I'm going to remember when we get off. I want to say, you know what? I think that's probably a safe place to land with.
Okay, cool. And you know, like, again, we keep saying we're probably going to circle back around with a bunch of these anyway. You know, we always get to the end of an hour. You know, this one's gone long. It's an hour and 15 minutes right now, but we hope you guys are getting bunches out of this. You know, we're just here chatting about audio, and we hope, you know, it's just an honest kind of organic place to chat about audio. Not everything we say is something that you should do, but we hoping that you get something out of it, and maybe use a tool or two that we can impart on you. So hope you guys enjoy it. See you on the next one.
See you, everybody.